You think discipline is a choice, yet something ancient inside you rejects every attempt to change. What if the voice resisting you isn't weakness, but an old survival script you never agreed to follow? Look closely. Your mind isn't sabotaging you. It's protecting a version of you that no longer exists. If this hits, save this video so the shift stays with you. A strange tension appears the moment you try to do something that matters. The inner voice, usually soft in the background, suddenly grows louder and heavy, whispering reasons to postpone, pause, delay. It feels personal, almost like sabotage. Yet the impulse rises before awareness has a chance to intervene. You sense the contradiction, but you didn't choose the thought that arrived. Another layer of discomfort emerges when you notice how quickly the mind scans for escape routes. It points to the couch, the phone, the easier task, not out of malice but out of ancient instinct. Energy was once survival, so conserving it feels like safety even now. That biological echo bends your intentions without asking. The mismatch feels intimate, but it's evolutionary. A deeper unease surfaces when you watch the way thoughts reorder themselves mid-intention. One moment you're ready to begin, and the next, a cascade of excuses forms out of thin air. There's no negotiation, no vote, no conscious approval. The reflex is older than your goals and faster than your awareness. This is biology playing defense. Silence hits differently when you see this pattern clearly. The mind believes effort is danger, and comfort is life-preserving, so it pushes you toward whatever feels easiest. It's not moral failure, it's physics. The body protects its fuel as if tomorrow depends on it. And yet, modern life demands the opposite: sustained effort, focus, consistency. But an even sharper realization waits behind that tension. If you never chose the impulse to avoid discomfort, and you never authored the excuses that followed, then who, exactly, is generating them? And who is the one noticing the conflict? Something subtle happens the instant you face a choice between effort and ease. Before awareness forms a single word, the mind tilts toward the path that feels smoother, lighter, less demanding. It's a reflex older than language, an invisible current pulling you toward comfort. The decision feels personal, but the selection was made long before intention arrived. You only witness the aftermath. What makes this so disorienting is how automatic it is. The mind runs cost-benefit calculations without ever revealing its math. A scroll feels lighter than a study session. A pause feels safer than a push. The brain isn't judging you, it's economizing. It seeks efficiency the way water seeks downhill. And in this quiet physics, challenge always loses unless redesigned. Yet the emotional weight of this choice lands on you. You feel the guilt, the frustration, the confusion about why simple tasks feel so heavy. The truth is that heaviness is engineered by neural friction, not personal flaw. The brain prefers what requires the fewest steps, the least resistance, the smoothest glide. And unless the terrain changes, the default stays the same. Here's the twist most people never see. Cognitive ease creates an illusion of intention. You think you chose the easy option, when in reality you only aligned with what the brain pre-selected to conserve energy. This exposes a deeper question. If effort feels unnatural, how do disciplined people achieve anything at scale? The answer lies in something far more structural than motivation. And that's why, before going deeper, pause for a second and subscribe so you don't miss the shift that changes everything ahead. There's a hidden mechanism behind this reflex, one that rewrites the entire idea of discipline. Modern pressure feels heavier than it should because your brain was never built for any of this. It wasn't designed for calendars, inboxes, deadlines, or the quiet grind of self-discipline. It evolved for threat detection, quick decisions, and short bursts of action. The mismatch is constant, ancient instincts trying to navigate a digital world. No wonder the mind feels overloaded before the day even begins. Look at the structure of modern goals: long-term, abstract, delayed in every reward. Nothing about that mirrors the environment your biology was shaped in. The ancestors who survived were the ones who reacted fast, conserved resources, and focused on what was immediately visible. That same wiring lives in you, tugging you toward what's near and away from what's distant. Biology plays a different game than society expects. This conflict explains why even simple habits feel like uphill climbs. Your brain interprets modern demands as unnatural stressors. Extended effort equals risk, and risk equals possible loss. So it reroutes you toward anything that offers quick relief, a notification, a distraction, a snack, a break. Comfort becomes camouflage for survival programming. The body thinks it's protecting you. But here's the twist that makes this struggle universal. Every disciplined person you admire feels the same instinctive resistance. The difference isn't biology, it's architecture. They've redesigned their world so their wiring works for them instead of against them. Systems, not strength, pull them toward their goals. And a deeper system, one you haven't seen yet, changes everything. Before we get there, save this video so you don't lose the thread when we enter the shift at the core of discipline. And that shift leads to something most people never expect, the point where ancient instinct can be hijacked and turned into momentum. Topic 7 will expose that, but first, the next idea bends the entire conversation. There's a moment every person knows too well. The spark of motivation feels powerful, but it evaporates the second real effort begins. That collapse isn't a personal flaw, it's the biology of fatigue taking the controls. Willpower drains like a battery, and the mind defends itself by shutting down anything that feels costly. The inner voice whispers shortcuts, delays, and tiny escapes, all in the name of preservation. This is why forcing yourself into discipline feels like dragging a boulder uphill. When exhaustion rises, instinct wins. The brain defaults to whatever requires the least strain, and no amount of hype can override that wiring for long. Motivation surges, but impulse decides. It's like trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. The water moves regardless. Yet people blame themselves instead of recognizing the real mechanism at play. Willpower isn't designed to sustain repeated effort, it's designed for short bursts in emergencies. Treating it like a long-term strategy is like trying to run a marathon on a single breath. The body rebels not because you're weak, but because you're using the wrong tool for the job. Here's a micro practice to feel this truth physically. Pause for 3 seconds and allow one intentional inhale. At the top of the breath, notice how the mind softens for a moment, effort loses tension. This tiny shift shows what discipline actually requires, not force, but state. When the state is wrong, the habit collapses. When the state is right, the habit feels frictionless. And the deeper you look at this, the stranger the real question becomes. If willpower isn't the driver of disciplined lives, then what invisible structure is? Notice how discipline feels impossible in the wrong surroundings. A cluttered desk, a buzzing phone, a soft couch, each one sends tiny signals that pull you away from effort. The mind interprets these cues as invitations to pause, drift, or delay. Without realizing it, you're negotiating with objects that always win. Environment becomes the invisible puppeteer shaping your choices. What feels like lack of discipline is often just proximity. Whatever sits within arm's reach becomes the default action. The brain isn't loyal to your goals, it's loyal to what's easiest to touch. This is why people can work deeply in a library yet fail miserably at home. The space decides before intention arrives. And the space almost always decides in favor of ease. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Willpower collapses fastest in environments that reward distraction. Bright screens, open tabs, endless notifications, they drip dopamine into the mind like a leaking faucet. You think you're choosing them, but the environment chose for you. The pull is engineered, predictable, and overwhelmingly physical. The shift happens when you redesign your surroundings so effort feels like the default path. A book placed on the pillow beats the phone hidden in a drawer. Gym clothes laid out the night before beat the morning excuse. The brain isn't fighting you, it's following whatever friction pattern you built. When the right choice becomes easier, the mind quietly obeys. And the next revelation goes even further. You can arrange your environment so your impulses start building your discipline for you. Every action you take is shaped by a silent blueprint around you. The visibility of an object, the distance to a tool, the number of steps between intention and execution, these tiny structural details decide far more than motivation ever will. The mind reads the environment like a map, and whichever road looks shortest becomes the chosen one. It's not discipline, it's design. What shocks most people is how subtle the influence can be. A water bottle placed on the desk increases hydration without a single act of will. A guitar left on a stand leads to practice, while one in a case collects dust. Your surroundings whisper instructions, and the brain treats those whispers as truth. When the desired path is visually obvious, the mind drifts toward it naturally. Choice architecture works because it removes the internal negotiation. No more debating whether to study, exercise, clean, or create. The environment has already pre-selected the answer. By removing steps, lowering friction, and making the right action visually magnetic, the mind stops fighting. It simply follows the path of least resistance because the path is now aligned with your goals. This is how disciplined people secretly operate. They don't rely on heroic bursts of willpower. They set traps, good traps. They make the right action so frictionless, so obvious, so attractive that their impulses cooperate instead of rebel. The system does the heavy lifting. The identity strengthens by osmosis. And discipline becomes something that happens almost accidentally. But the true power of this isn't in controlling choices, it's in hijacking the brain's automatic loops. And that doorway opens wider than you think. If this is hitting close to home, take a second, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. Every habit you perform runs on a loop that's older than language, cue routine reward. This circuitry fires automatically, conserving energy by repeating whatever is familiar. The mind loves loops because they demand no negotiation, no analysis, no hesitation. They run like gravity. The brilliance of habit stacking is that it rides this ancient momentum instead of fighting it. Think of it this way: the brain resists starting new actions, but it rarely resists continuing a chain that has already begun. When you attach a 2-minute behavior to an existing cue, brewing coffee, brushing teeth, opening a laptop, you bypass the psychological startup cost entirely. The new behavior slips into the rhythm of the old one, unnoticed by resistance. The loop expands without friction. This is why small actions become disproportionately powerful. A single push-up after a shower eventually becomes a workout. A one-sentence journal after breakfast becomes a practice. The brain accepts these additions because they feel like natural extensions, not unfamiliar commitments. You're not forcing change, you're leveraging the neurological echo already in motion. Here's the twist: disciplined people don't build massive habits from scratch. They splice them into structures that already exist. They let the old behavior carry the new one. It's the difference between swimming upstream and drifting with the current. And once the current accelerates, the identity begins to shift without conscious effort. You start becoming someone the brain can cooperate with. Before going deeper, hit like so this message resurfaces when you revisit your habits later. Because the next insight reveals why procrastination isn't a flaw, it's an engineering problem waiting to be solved. Procrastination feels emotional, but its roots are architectural. The mind avoids tasks that look vague, heavy, or unrewarding because ambiguity signals danger in evolutionary terms. A task without a clear starting point feels like stepping into fog. So the brain delays, not out of laziness, but out of self-protection. What feels like failure is often just unclear design. If the path isn't obvious, the mind will choose anything that is. A glowing screen, a quick message, a snack, each one offers instant clarity and instant reward. The brain gravitates toward whatever reduces uncertainty, even if it derails your goals. This is why people feel pulled toward distractions. The design of the environment makes them the simpler choice. Clarity wins, complexity loses. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most procrastination problems disappear the moment a task becomes visible, specific, and ridiculously easy to begin. The first step carries the heaviest psychological weight. Once movement starts, the resistance drops sharply. It's the static state that feels unbearable, not the work itself. The brain simply hates undefined beginnings. Try this micro practice to feel the shift. Pick a task you've delayed. Reduce it to the smallest possible physical action, one tap, one sentence, one click. Now pause and notice how your mind relaxes when the start point becomes unmistakable. The fog lifts instantly. That's the power of design over willpower. But this leads to a deeper revelation. If procrastination dissolves through structure, then discipline itself can become something you no longer have to feel. There's a myth that disciplined people love the grind. In reality, most don't. What they love is the outcome, the identity, the feeling of alignment. But the daily actions? Those are often neutral at best. The secret is that they don't wait to feel like it. They build systems where the right action is the easiest action, so emotion becomes irrelevant. When friction disappears, discipline stops being a battle. A pre-packed gym bag removes the morning argument. A scheduled writing window removes the debate. A visible checklist removes the internal negotiation. The brain follows structure the way vines follow trellises. It climbs effortlessly when the frame is already there. Ease becomes the architect of consistency. This is why relying on motivation destroys progress. Motivation is dramatic but unreliable. Discipline born from structure is quiet but unstoppable. You're not fighting impulses anymore, you're steering them. You turn the environment into a machine that makes the right choice obvious and the wrong one inconvenient. This isn't self-control, it's strategy. Here's the strange relief most people never expect. You don't need to love the process for it to work. You only need to make the process unavoidable. Once the system holds you, momentum carries you. And when momentum builds, identity follows. You stop trying to be disciplined and start becoming someone who simply does what needs to be done. And yet there's a level even deeper than systems, one that rewires the story you tell yourself about who you are. Something profound shifts when discipline stops being a taskmaster and becomes a reflection of who you believe yourself to be. The mind naturally aligns with identity. It resists anything that contradicts it. When someone thinks, "I'm not consistent," their actions bend to prove the statement. When someone thinks, "I'm the kind of person who finishes things," their behavior rises to meet that truth. Identity makes effort feel inevitable. Every action you take is a vote. Drink water instead of soda, vote. Read one page instead of scrolling, vote. Do 2 minutes of exercise instead of 0, vote. These tiny ballots shape the story the mind tells about you. And once the story changes, the behavior stabilizes. Identity becomes the autopilot that effort never could be. It carries you when motivation breaks. This is the quiet power behind transformations. Systems create momentum, but identity locks it in. You can design your space, structure your habits, and engineer your impulses, but none of it becomes permanent until the inner narrative updates. When the self-concept shifts, the brain stops negotiating. It starts cooperating. It begins selecting behaviors that feel like you. This is why disciplined people rarely talk about discipline. They talk about standards. They talk about alignment. They talk about becoming someone they respect. The work becomes less about force and more about coherence. You no longer ask, "How do I stay consistent?" You ask, "Who am I becoming?" And the answers guide your behavior without internal debate. But this leaves one final question hanging in the air, the one that rewrites everything you think you know about your own mind, your impulses, and the invisible forces shaping your choices. Discipline was never about force, it was about alignment. Once you see the hidden machinery beneath your impulses, the struggle loses its mystery. Your environment, your systems, and your smallest choices quietly sculpt the identity you rise into. And the moment your identity shifts, effort becomes momentum and discipline becomes something you are, not something you chase. If this opened something in you, subscribe, like, and share with someone walking the same path. So here's your final question. Who are you becoming when no one is watching? And what habits are casting the deciding vote? If you're ready to rewrite that narrative, comment "Awaken now," and let this be the first step in the identity you choose. The next video continues this transformation. Follow it, and keep evolving.